The fire that had torn through the Sullivan farmhouse when Marlena was 8 years old had left more than just memories of smoke and screams. It had carved its way across her face, down her neck, and along her left shoulder in twisting rivers of puckered skin that no amount of time could smooth away. Now, at 23, she kept her wheat-colored hair long and loose, arranging it carefully each morning to hide as much of the scarring as possible, though nothing could conceal the damage entirely. The marks ran from her left temple down to her jaw, pulling at the corner of her mouth in a way that made smiling feel like a betrayal of the girl she might have been. Veta, Colorado Territory, in the spring of 1876, was a town that minded its own business, nestled against the Spanish peaks with the promise of silver and cattle driving its heartbeat. Marlena had arrived 3 weeks ago on the westbound stage, carrying everything she owned in a single carpet bag, and a letter of introduction to Mrs. Henley, who ran the boarding house on Main Street. The older woman had taken one look at Marlena's face, pursed her lips in what might have been pity, and shown her to a small room at the back of the house where she would not disturb the other boarders. "You can work for your keep," Mrs. Henley had said, not unkindly. "Cooking, cleaning, laundry. Keep your hair neat and try not to frighten the guests." Marlena had agreed because she had no choice. Her parents were gone, victims of influenza the previous winter, and her younger brother Thomas had gone to California with their uncle, leaving her alone in Missouri with debts and memories she could not afford. Veta represented a fresh start, or at least a place where fewer people knew her story. She had not counted on Zachary Grayson. The first time she saw him was through the kitchen window of the boarding house on a Tuesday morning. He sat astride a bay gelding in front of the general store, tall and broad-shouldered in the way of men who spent their lives working the land. His dark hair needed cutting, curling slightly at his collar, and even from a distance, she could see the easy confidence in the way he moved, dismounting with fluid grace and looping his reins around the hitching post. He wore work-worn denim and a brown shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing tanned forearms. "That is Zachary Grayson," Mrs. Henley said, appearing beside Marlena with a basket of potatoes that needed peeling. "Owns the largest cattle ranch within 50 miles. His father built it up from nothing, and when the old man passed 5 years back, Zachary took it over. Good man, fair employer. Half the unmarried women in the territory have set their caps for him." "I am sure they have," Marlena murmured, turning away from the window. Men like that belonged to women who could smile without their faces pulling in unnatural directions, women who did not flinch when strangers stared. But fate, or perhaps simple bad luck, had other plans. That afternoon, Mrs. Henley sent Marlena to the general store with a list of supplies. "Take the back streets if you like," the older woman said gently. "I know you prefer it." Marlena did prefer it. The fewer people who saw her, the fewer whispered conversations she had to endure. She wrapped a shawl over her hair despite the warmth of the day and made her way through the dusty streets, keeping her scarred side turned away from the road. The general store was blessedly empty when she entered, the proprietor's wife nodding at her before returning to her inventory. Marlena moved through the aisles, gathering flour, salt, and coffee, letting herself relax in the familiar ritual of ordinary tasks. She was reaching for a tin of baking powder on a high shelf when the door opened behind her. "Afternoon, Mrs. Patterson," a deep voice said, warm and friendly. "Good afternoon, Mr. Grayson. I will be right with you." Marlena froze, her fingers just brushing the tin. She could feel him behind her, could sense the space he took up in the small store. She stretched higher, desperate to grab what she needed and leave, but the shelf was just out of reach. Let me help you with that." Before she could protest, he was beside her, easily retrieving the tin and holding it out. She turned instinctively, forgetting for one crucial moment to angle her face away, and found herself looking up into eyes the color of creek water in summer, gray-green and startlingly direct. His gaze traveled across her face. She saw the exact moment he noticed the scarring, saw his eyes widen fractionally. Her stomach clenched, and she snatched the tin from his hand, mumbling something that might have been thanks, and fled to the counter with her heart hammering against her ribs. Behind her, she heard Mrs. Patterson say, "Do not mind Marlena, Mr. Grayson. She is new to town. Keeps to herself." "I see," he said quietly, and Marlena hated the thoughtfulness in his tone, the way it suggested he was thinking about her at all. She paid for her purchases and escaped into the afternoon sun, not breathing properly until she was 3 blocks away. Stupid, she told herself viciously. Stupid to forget, even for a moment, to hide. But if she thought that would be the end of it, she was mistaken. 2 days later, Mrs. Henley called her into the parlor. "I have had an interesting proposition," the older woman said, folding her hands in her lap. "Mr. Grayson came by this morning. His cook at the ranch broke her leg and will be laid up for months. He needs someone to replace her temporarily and is willing to pay well. I recommended you." Marlena felt the blood drain from her face. "No, I cannot. Please send someone else." "There is no one else," Mrs. Henley said practically. "You are the best cook I have, and the money would be good for both of us. He specifically asked for you after I mentioned your skills. He saw me, in the store. He knows about my face." "Of course he does, child. And yet he still wants to hire you. Does that not tell you something?" It told Marlena that he pitied her, which was somehow worse than disgust. But she also knew that Mrs. Henley was struggling to make ends meet, and the boarding house income was unpredictable. If the older woman recommended her for this position, refusing would be both ungrateful and impractical. "How long?" she asked quietly. 3 months, perhaps 4, until his regular cook heals. You would live at the ranch during the week and return here on Sundays. It is respectable, I assure you. He has a housekeeper who lives there as well, an older woman named Mrs. Chen." Marlena closed her eyes. 3 months. She could endure anything for 3 months. "I will do it," she said. The Grayson Ranch sat in a valley 15 miles south of Veta, where the grassland stretched golden and endless beneath the vast Colorado sky. The ranch house itself was larger than Marlena had expected, built of honey-colored wood with a wide porch that wrapped around 3 sides. Corrals and outbuildings spread behind it, and in the distance, she could see cattle dotting the hills like scattered seeds. Zachary met her wagon personally, helping her down with a hand that was warm and calloused through her glove. "Miss Sullivan," he said, and his voice was as she remembered it, deep and careful. "Thank you for coming. I hope the journey was not too difficult." "It was fine, Mr. Grayson," she said, keeping her face angled away and her hair forward. He collected her bag before she could protest. "Let me show you to your quarters. Mrs. Chen is eager to meet you." The housekeeper turned out to be a small, sturdy woman in her 60s with iron gray hair and sharp black eyes. She looked Marlena up and down once, nodded as if satisfied, and said, "You know your way around a kitchen?" "Yes, madam." "Good. I hate cooking. Come, I will show you the house." The kitchen was spacious and well-equipped, with a large stove, ample counter space, and windows that let in the afternoon light. Marlena's quarters were off the kitchen, a small but comfortable room with a real bed and a washstand. It was better than anything she had expected. "Mr. Grayson eats breakfast at 5:30, dinner at noon, and supper at 7, Mrs. Chen explained briskly. "He has 6 hands living in the bunkhouse who take breakfast and dinner here as well. You will ring the bell for meals. Sundays everyone fends for themselves, which is when you return to town. Any questions? No, madam. Then I will leave you to settle in. Supper is in 3 hours. Mrs. Chen paused at the door. Mr. Grayson is a good man, fair and honest. Do your work and you will have no troubles here. Marlena unpacked her few belongings and stood for a long moment staring out the window at the ranch spread before her. She could do this. It was just cooking, just keeping her head down and her face hidden. 3 months would pass quickly. That first supper went smoothly. She prepared beef stew with dumplings, biscuits, and dried apple pie, and the ranch hands ate with the focused intensity of men who worked hard and appreciated good food. Zachary ate at the head of the table, asking the men about their day, discussing horses and fencing and water rights. He thanked Marlena quietly when she served him, and she nodded without meeting his eyes. The pattern continued for the first week. She rose before dawn to prepare breakfast, spent her mornings baking bread and preparing dinner, her afternoons on supper and cleaning. The work was hard but familiar, and she took comfort in the routine. The ranch hands were polite, Mrs. Chen was efficient, and Zachary was unfailingly courteous, but distant. She should have known it would not last. It was the second Thursday of her employment when the accident happened. She was pulling a pan of cornbread from the oven when one of the hands, a young man named Billy, burst through the door in a panic. She turned instinctively, and the hot pan caught the edge of her apron, flipping and sending the cornbread sliding across the floor. "Sorry, Miss Marlena," Billy gasped, "but we need help. One of the horses kicked Mr. Grayson. He is bleeding bad." Marlena did not think. She simply moved, following Billy out to the corral where Zachary sat on the ground, his hand pressed to his ribs, blood seeping between his fingers. His face was pale but set. "It is not deep," he said when he saw her. "The hoof caught my shirt and tore the skin, that is all. You need it cleaned and bandaged," she said firmly, her fear for him overriding her usual caution. "Can you walk to the house?" "I am not an invalid," he said, but he let Billy and another hand help him to his feet. She could see him favoring his left side as they made their way to the kitchen. Mrs. Chen had gone to town for the afternoon, which meant Marlena was alone with Zachary as the hands deposited him in a kitchen chair and fled back to their work. She heated water and gathered clean cloths, trying not to think about how she was about to touch him, about how close she would have to be. "You will need to remove your shirt," she said, not looking at him. "You are blushing, Miss Sullivan," he said, and there was amusement in his voice despite the pain he must be feeling. "I am a cook, not a nurse," she said sharply. "But I am the only option you have at the moment, so please cooperate." He unbuttoned his shirt slowly, and she kept her eyes fixed on her task, bringing the basin of warm water and cloths to the table. When he shrugged the shirt off, she could not help but notice the breadth of his shoulders, the muscle earned through years of physical labor. The wound was a long gash along his ribs, bleeding steadily but not, as he had said, dangerously deep. She cleaned it as gently as she could, aware of every breath he took, every small flinch when the cloth touched torn skin. His hands gripped the edge of the chair, knuckles white, but he did not complain. "You are good at this," he said after a moment. "I have practice." The words came out before she could stop them. "When you are burned, you learn about wounds and how they heal." "The fire," he said quietly. "Mrs. Henley mentioned you had been in a fire as a child." Marlena's hand stilled. Of course Mrs. Henley had mentioned it. Everyone always mentioned it, as if explaining her face was a necessary kindness. "Yes," she said flatly. "Our farmhouse burned. I was 8. May I continue?" "I did not mean to pry." "Everyone means to pry. They simply pretend they do not." She resumed cleaning the wound, her movements precise and controlled. "This will need stitches. I can do it, but it will hurt. I trust you." Those 3 words, spoken so simply, made something in her chest tighten. She threaded a needle with steady hands, grateful for the skills her mother had taught her years ago, and began to stitch. Zachary's breathing changed, becoming deeper and more controlled, but he did not pull away. "Tell me something," he said after a moment, his voice strained. "Something to distract me. I am not good at conversation. Then tell me why you came to Veta." She considered refusing, but perhaps if she talked, this would be over faster. "My parents died last winter, influenza. My brother went to California and I had nothing left in Missouri. Mrs. Henley's sister knew my mother and wrote to her on my behalf. I am sorry about your parents, so am I." She tied off the last stitch and began to bandage his ribs. "You were fortunate. This could have been much worse. I have been kicked before, hazard of the profession." He watched her as she worked, and she could feel his gaze on her face, on the scars she could not hide at this distance. "You are very skilled, Miss Sullivan. Thank you." She finished the bandage and stepped back quickly, gathering the soiled cloths. "You should rest today. No heavy work." "Are you giving me orders on my own ranch? I am suggesting that you not tear my careful stitches by being foolish." She turned to the basin, needing distance, needing to not feel his eyes on her. "Miss Sullivan." She did not turn. "Yes, Mr. Grayson, thank you, truly." She nodded and kept her face turned away until she heard him leave. That night, she lay awake in her small room and wondered why his gratitude had felt like more than simple thanks, why the memory of his trust made her feel things she had thought long dead. After the incident with the horse, something shifted between them, subtle as morning mist but just as pervasive. Zachary began spending more time in the house, often sitting at the kitchen table with his account books in the late afternoon when Marlena was preparing supper. She told herself he simply needed a flat surface to work, but she could not shake the feeling that he was watching her, studying her the way a man might study a puzzle he wanted to solve. "You do not have to hide your face around me," he said one evening, his voice casual as he tallied numbers in his ledger, Marlena's knife stilled against the potato she was peeling. "I do not know what you mean. You always angle yourself away. You wear your hair forward." "I have seen your face, Miss Sullivan. The scars do not bother me. They bother everyone," she said quietly. "Not everyone." She set down the knife and finally looked at him directly, letting him see the full extent of the damage the fire had wrought. "Do not pity me, Mr. Grayson. I do not need your kindness. I need employment." He leaned back in his chair, his gray-green eyes steady on hers. "What if I told you it was not pity? Then I would say you are lying to make me feel better, which is a different kind of cruelty. You have a harsh view of the world." "The world has been harsh with me. It seems only fair to return the favor." She picked up the knife again, her movements precise and controlled. "Your supper will be ready in an hour. Marlena." The sound of her first name on his lips startled her so much she nearly dropped the potato. He had never used it before, had always been scrupulously proper with Miss Sullivan this and Miss Sullivan that. "I am not lying," he said, and there was something in his voice that made her throat tight. "And I am not trying to be cruel. I am simply telling you that when I look at you, I see a strong woman who knows her way around a wound, who cooks like an angel, and who has survived things that would have broken most people. The scars are part of that story, but they are not the whole story." "You do not know the whole story," she whispered. "Then tell me." "Why? Why does it matter to you?" He closed his ledger slowly, his attention fully on her now. "Because I would like to know you, because I enjoy your presence in my home. Because when you smile, which you do not do nearly enough, it lights up the entire room despite what you think your face looks like." Marlena's breath caught. This could not be happening. Men like Zachary Grayson did not say such things to women like her. They married pretty girls from good families, girls who could give them beautiful children and stand beside them without shame at church socials and town gatherings. "I should finish supper," she said, her voice unsteady. "Of course." He stood, gathering his books. "But Marlena, think about what I said, please." He left her alone in the kitchen, and she stood there for a long moment, her hands trembling as she tried to make sense of what had just happened. Over the following weeks, Zachary continued his campaign, though campaign seemed too aggressive a word for his gentle persistence. He brought her wildflowers from the hills, leaving them on the kitchen table without comment. He asked her opinion on everything from which cattle to sell to whether the south pasture needed more fencing. He told her stories about his father, about building the ranch, about his dreams for the future. And slowly, so slowly she barely noticed it happening, Marlena began to thaw. She found herself smiling at his jokes, even laughing occasionally, the sound rusty from disuse. She began to sit with him in the evenings after supper was cleaned up, drinking coffee and talking about everything and nothing. She learned that he had been engaged once, years ago, to a banker's daughter from Denver who had taken one look at ranch life and fled back to the city. She told him about her brother, about her parents, about the books she had loved as a child. "What did you want to be?" he asked one evening as the sun set in gold and crimson glory beyond the windows. Before the fire, what did little Marlena dream about? "A teacher," she said softly. "I loved books. I loved the idea of helping children learn. But after the fire, my parents could not afford to send me to normal school, and besides, no one wants a teacher who looks like me. That is their loss. That is reality. Reality can change." He reached across the table and covered her hand with his, the gesture so natural she did not pull away. "You could teach the ranch children. We have 6 families within riding distance and more than a dozen children who need education. I have been thinking of building a schoolhouse." "You have been thinking of it, or you are thinking of it now. Does it matter?" She looked down at his hand on hers, at the rough calluses and the warmth of his skin. "Why are you doing this? Why are you being kind to me?" "Because I care about you." He said it simply, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "Because somewhere between the beef stew and the stitches and the way you get flour on your nose when you bake, I fell in love with you, Marlena Sullivan." The world stopped. She could hear her heartbeat in her ears, could feel the blood rushing through her veins. "You cannot love me, and yet I do. You barely know me. I know enough. I know you are brave and kind and that you hide your strength behind walls built from old hurts. I know you deserve to be loved, even if you do not believe it yourself." Tears burned in her eyes, hot and unexpected. "I am not what you need. You need someone whole, someone beautiful, someone who can stand beside you without people staring and whispering. I need you." He stood and came around the table, kneeling beside her chair so they were eye level. "I need the woman who sings while she needs bread. I need the woman who sweet talks my horses and feeds scraps to the barn cats. I need the woman who stitched me up and ordered me to rest like she had every right in the world." "Zachary," she whispered, his name a plea and a prayer. "Let me show you," he said gently. "Let me show you how I see you." Before she could answer, before she could think of all the reasons this was impossible, he reached up and carefully, so carefully, tucked her hair behind her ear, fully exposing the scarred side of her face. She flinched instinctively, but he did not pull away. Instead, he traced the scars with his fingertips, following the twisted paths of old burns from her temple to her jaw. His touch was reverent, gentle as a whisper, and when he spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "Perfect," he said. "You are perfect, Marlena." A sob broke from her throat, years of pain and shame and loneliness cracking open like a dam. Zachary pulled her into his arms, and she wept against his chest while he held her and murmured soft words into her hair. She cried for the girl she had been, for the life the fire had stolen, for all the years she had believed she was unlovable. When the storm finally passed, she pulled back, embarrassed. "I have soaked your shirt. I have others." He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away her tears. "I meant what I said, every word. I do not know how to believe you. Then let me prove it. Let me court you properly. Let me show you every day that you are precious to me. People will talk. Let them." He smiled, and it transformed his whole face, making him look younger and happier than she had ever seen him. "I have never cared much for gossip anyway. Your mother would have wanted someone better for you. My mother would have loved you." She was a practical woman who valued kindness over appearances, and she would have appreciated a daughter-in-law who could cook this well. "Daughter-in-law," Marlena's heart stuttered. "You are getting ahead of yourself, Mr. Grayson. Maybe. But I know what I want, and I have learned not to waste time." He stood, drawing her up with him. "Let me court you, Marlena. That is all I ask. Give me a chance to win your heart." She looked up at him, at this strong, kind man who claimed to see beauty in her scars, and felt hope unfurl in her chest like spring flowers after a long winter. "I think you may have already won it," she whispered. His smile grew wider, and then he was kissing her, soft and sweet and certain. She melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt, tasting salt and promise on his lips. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Marlena Sullivan. I am afraid," she admitted. "I am afraid this is a dream and I will wake up alone." "Not a dream. I promise you this is real. I am real. And I am not going anywhere." That night, lying in her small room with moonlight streaming through the window, Marlena allowed herself to imagine a future she had never dared to hope for. A future with Zachary, with love, with a place she truly belonged. But old fears died hard, and she knew the road ahead would not be easy. She was proven right the following Sunday when she returned to town for her day off. Mrs. Henley took one look at her face and smiled knowingly. "Something has happened." Marlena could not keep the blush from her cheeks. "Mr. Grayson has asked to court me, and you said yes, I hope." "I did, but I am not sure it is wise." "Love rarely is, child, but that does not make it any less worthwhile." Mrs. Henley poured them both tea and settled in her chair. "You should know, there has been talk in town." Marlena's stomach clenched. "What kind of talk?" "Nothing vicious, mind you, just curiosity. Zachary Grayson is an eligible bachelor, and people have noticed he has been spending his time with you. Some of the mothers with marriageable daughters are disappointed. I imagine they are. There is also Fiona Carmichael." The name meant nothing to Marlena, and her confusion must have shown because Mrs. Henley continued. "She is the daughter of the largest landowner in the county after Zachary. Her father has been trying to arrange a match between them for years. Fiona herself has been quite vocal about her intentions regarding Zachary." "I see." Marlena's joy dimmed. Of course there would be someone like Fiona, someone beautiful and appropriate, someone who actually deserved a man like Zachary. "Do not look like that," Mrs. Henley said firmly. "Zachary has never shown the slightest interest in Fiona, despite her father's machinations. If he has chosen you, it is because he wants you, not because he needs a wealthy alliance. But she will make trouble. Possibly. But you are stronger than you think, Marlena Sullivan. Do not let other people's jealousy steal your happiness." The warning proved prescient. The following Wednesday, a carriage arrived at the ranch bearing Fiona Carmichael herself. Marlena saw her from the kitchen window, a vision in emerald silk with golden hair piled elegantly atop her head. She moved with the confidence of someone who had never questioned her place in the world, sweeping up to the porch as if she owned it. Mrs. Chen answered the door, and Marlena could hear the conversation clearly from where she stood frozen by the window. "I am here to see Mr. Grayson," Fiona announced. "Tell him Fiona Carmichael is calling. Mr. Grayson is out checking the herds, miss. He will not be back until evening. Then I shall wait." Fiona pushed past Mrs. Chen into the parlor, settling herself on the sofa as if she had every right to be there. Mrs. Chen appeared in the kitchen a moment later, her expression sour. "We have a visitor. She wants tea." Marlena prepared a tray with trembling hands, hating the anxiety that twisted in her gut. This was Zachary's home, not hers. She was the hired cook, nothing more, regardless of what private promises had been whispered between them. She carried the tray to the parlor, keeping her face carefully angled away. Fiona looked up as she entered, and Marlena saw the exact moment the other woman registered her scars. Fiona's perfect features twisted in barely concealed disgust before smoothing into false sweetness. "How tragic," Fiona said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "What happened to your poor face?" "A fire, miss." Marlena set the tray down, her hands steady despite her racing heart. "Will there be anything else?" "No, you may go." Fiona dismissed her with a wave, already turning her attention back to examining the room as if cataloging everything she would change when she became mistress of the house. Marlena fled to the kitchen, hating herself for running, hating the tears that threatened. She threw herself into preparing supper with unnecessary violence, kneading bread dough as if it were her enemy. She heard Zachary return in the late afternoon, heard his boots on the porch and his voice asking Mrs. Chen who was visiting. Moments later, she heard him enter the parlor, his tone polite but cool. "Miss Carmichael, this is unexpected. I was in the area and thought I would call on you, Zachary. It has been too long since we spoke properly. I have been busy with the ranch, so I have heard. I also heard you have a new cook. That poor scarred creature I just met." Marlena's hands stilled in the bread dough. The kitchen had gone silent, and she realized Mrs. Chen had stopped working to listen as well. "That poor scarred creature," Zachary said, his voice dangerously quiet, "is Miss Marlena Sullivan, and she is not a topic for your gossip, Fiona." "Oh, I did not mean any harm. I am sure she is perfectly adequate for cooking and such." "But Zachary, surely you must see how it looks, having someone like that in your home. People are talking. Then people should find more productive uses for their time. I am thinking of your reputation, of the ranch's standing in the community. You need a wife who can help you socially, who can host gatherings and present the right image, not some hired girl with a damaged face." The silence that followed was terrible. Marlena wanted to disappear into the floor, wanted to be anywhere but standing here listening to someone articulate every fear she had ever held. "Get out." Zachary's voice was cold as winter ice, and Marlena jumped despite herself. "What? Get out of my house. Now." "Zachary, I am only trying to help you see reason. You are insulting a woman I care deeply about, and you are doing it in my own home. I want you to leave, Miss Carmichael, and I do not want you to return unless you are prepared to apologize to Miss Sullivan. You cannot be serious. You care about her, that ugly, scarred girl. Out. Now." Marlena heard rapid footsteps, heard the front door open and slam. Moments later, a carriage rattled away at speed. Then Zachary appeared in the kitchen doorway, his face flushed with anger, his chest heaving. "Marlena." She could not look at him, could not bear to see pity or shame or any of the emotions she imagined must be warring in him now that Fiona had voiced all the ugly truths. "She was right," Marlena whispered. "She was right about everything. The hell she was." He crossed to her in 3 long strides, gently taking her flower-covered hands in his. "Look at me, please." She forced herself to meet his eyes and found only anger there, but not at her. Never at her. "You are not ugly," he said fiercely. "You are not damaged. You are not any of the terrible things small-minded people say. You are brave and strong and beautiful, and I will spend the rest of my life proving that to you if I have to." She said, "People are talking. People always talk. They talked when I refused to marry the Denver banker's daughter. They talked when I changed how we ran the cattle drives. They will talk about this too, and then they will find something else to occupy their tiny minds. I do not care, Marlena. I care about you. But your reputation, the ranch, will be fine. Better than fine, because I will have you." He pulled her closer, heedless of the flower transferring to his shirt. "Marry me." Her heart stopped. "What, marry me? Not next year or next month, as soon as we can arrange it. Marry me and be my wife, and let me spend every day showing you how precious you are to me." "That is insane. You cannot propose to me in your kitchen covered in flour with your hands full of bread dough." "Why not? This is where you shine. This is where you are most yourself. It seems perfect to me." He was smiling now, that transformative smile that made her believe impossible things. "Say yes, Marlena. Say you will take a chance on us." "I am afraid," she admitted. "I am afraid you will wake up one day and regret choosing me. Never. I promise you, never." He released one of her hands to trace her scars again, that gentle, reverent touch that made her want to weep. "These are part of your story, part of what made you who you are, and I love who you are, every stubborn, kind, wounded, beautiful part of you." "Yes," she whispered, the word escaping before she could think better of it. "Yes, I will marry you." His shout of joy brought Mrs. Chen running, and when she saw them embracing in the middle of the kitchen, flour everywhere and bread dough forgotten, she smiled the first warm smile Marlena had ever seen from her. "About time," Mrs. Chen said. "I will heat water for baths. You both need cleaning up before supper." They were married 3 weeks later in the small church in Veta with Mrs. Henley and Mrs. Chen as witnesses and half the town in attendance, drawn by curiosity more than goodwill. Marlena wore a simple blue dress that Mrs. Henley had helped her make, and she left her hair pulled back, her scars visible, her chin high. Zachary stood at the altar looking at her as if she were the most beautiful woman in the world, and when he slipped the ring on her finger and kissed her for the first time as her husband, she believed it might actually be true. The reception was held at the ranch, and Marlena cooked for it herself, unable to trust such an important meal to anyone else. The food was praised, the dancing went late into the night, and if some people whispered about the scarred bride and her rancher husband, Marlena found she did not care as much as she once would have. She was too happy to care. Their wedding night was gentle and sweet, Zachary patient with her inexperience, worshipping her body as if it were sacred. When he traced the scars that ran down her neck and across her shoulder, he called her beautiful, perfect, his, and she finally allowed herself to believe him. The weeks that followed were a revelation. Marlena had never imagined she could be this happy, could wake each morning excited for the day ahead. She ran the household with quiet efficiency, earning the respect of the ranch hands and Mrs. Chen. She began teaching the ranch children in the afternoons, gathering them in the big parlor for lessons in reading and arithmetic, and discovered she had a gift for it. But more than any of that, she learned what it meant to be loved. Zachary courted her still, even after their marriage, bringing her wildflowers and stolen kisses, taking her riding in the evenings to watch the sunset. He held her when nightmares of the fire woke her gasping, whispering reassurances into her hair. He made love to her with reverence and passion, teaching her body pleasures she had never imagined. And when, 4 months after their wedding, she realized she was with child, his joy was so profound it brought tears to both their eyes. "A baby," he said, his hand splayed across her still flat belly. "Our baby." "Are you happy?" she asked, needing to hear him say it. "Happy does not begin to cover it. I am blessed. I am grateful. I am the luckiest man in Colorado territory." He kissed her softly. "Boy or girl, I do not care. As long as you are both healthy, nothing else matters. What if the baby has my scars?" The fear had been lurking in the back of her mind since she first suspected her pregnancy. "What if I have passed something terrible on? Then we will love that child just as fiercely as we will love any child. Scars or no scars, whatever comes, we will face it together." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though Marlena tired more easily than she liked. Mrs. Chen took over more of the cooking, and the ranch hands treated Marlena like she was made of spun glass, rushing to help her with anything heavy or difficult. Fiona Carmichael appeared once more, 6 months into Marlena's pregnancy, arriving at Sunday services in Veta with her father. She swept past Marlena and Zachary without acknowledgement, but Marlena caught the flash of bitterness in the other woman's eyes and felt only pity. Fiona had everything society valued and yet seemed perpetually unhappy, while Marlena had found joy in the most unexpected place. "Ignore her," Zachary murmured, his hand warm on her back. "She does not matter." "I know," Marlena said and meant it. In late November, as the first snow dusted the Spanish peaks, Marlena went into labor. Mrs. Chen sent for the midwife from town, and Zachary paced the parlor like a caged animal while Marlena labored in their bedroom. The process was long and difficult, but when the sun rose on a new day, their son entered the world with a furious cry that made his father weep with relief. They named him Thomas, after Marlena's brother, and he was perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes, and skin unmarked by fire or misfortune. He had Zachary's gray-green eyes and Marlena's wheat-colored hair, and when he nursed for the first time, Marlena felt her heart expand in ways she had not known were possible. "He is beautiful," Zachary whispered, sitting beside them on the bed, his arm around Marlena's shoulders. "You are both beautiful." "I was so afraid," Marlena admitted. "Afraid of so many things, I know. But you were brave anyway. You are always brave." Winter passed in a haze of feedings and diapers and sleepless nights that Zachary and Marlena navigated together. When spring returned, bringing wildflowers and warmer weather, Thomas was already growing, becoming more alert and interested in the world around him. Marlena's teaching expanded to include more children from neighboring ranches, and Zachary made good on his promise to build a proper schoolhouse, a small building with windows on 3 sides and a stove for heat. She taught there 3 afternoons a week, Thomas sleeping in a basket near her desk while the older children practiced their letters. Life settled into a rhythm, peaceful and productive. The ranch prospered under Zachary's management, and Marlena's skills as a teacher became known throughout the region. People came to respect her, not despite her scars, but simply accepting them as part of who she was. Thomas grew into a curious, energetic toddler who followed his father around the ranch on unsteady legs, chattering in the nonsensical language of small children. He showed no fear of the horses, no hesitation around the cattle, and Zachary declared him a natural rancher. When Thomas was 2 years old, Marlena discovered she was pregnant again. This time, a daughter arrived in the summer heat, smaller and quieter than her brother had been. They named her Sarah, and she had Marlena's features, including a delicate version of her mother's chin. "She looks like you," Zachary said, holding his daughter with careful reverence. "She is going to be as beautiful as her mother." "And as stubborn," Mrs. Chen predicted, and everyone laughed because it was likely true. The years unfolded like pages in a book, each one bringing new joys and challenges. Marlena's brother Thomas finally wrote from California, having struck silver and wanting to reconnect with his sister. They began a correspondence that gradually healed old wounds, and he visited once, meeting his namesake nephew and marveling at the life Marlena had built. "I am happy for you," he said on his last evening at the ranch, watching Zachary play with the children in the yard. "I was worried, after Mother and Father died, that you would be alone, but you found something good here." "I found everything here," Marlena said simply. Fiona Carmichael eventually married a railroad magnate from Denver and moved away from Veta. The Carmichael Ranch was sold to a family from Texas, and the new neighbors proved friendly and respectful. The gossip that had once swirled around Marlena's marriage to Zachary faded, replaced by admiration for the school she ran and the family they were building. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Zachary took Marlena to the spot where he had first realized he loved her, a high meadow on the ranch where wildflowers grew in profusion and the view stretched for miles. They left the children with Mrs. Chen for the afternoon and rode out together, the horses picking their way carefully through the tall grass. "You remember the first time we came here?" Zachary asked as they dismounted. "How could I forget? You brought me here a week after you proposed, and I was so nervous I barely looked at the view. You were terrified I would change my mind." He pulled her close, his arms circling her waist, as if that were even possible. "I have changed since then," she said softly. "I am not the frightened woman you married. No, you are not. You are stronger, more confident, but still just as beautiful, just as perfect to me." He traced her scars, that familiar gesture that never failed to move her. "I love you, Marlena Grayson, today, tomorrow, and every day after that." "I love you too," she whispered. "You taught me that I could be loved, that my scars did not define my worth. You gave me everything I never knew I needed." They made love in the meadow, slow and sweet under the vast blue sky, and afterward lay tangled together in the grass, talking about their dreams for the future. More children, perhaps, expanding the school, growing old together on this land they both loved. "You ever regret it?" Marlena asked as the sun began its descent toward the mountains. "Choosing me instead of someone like Fiona?" "Never, not once." He propped himself on his elbow, looking down at her with such love it made her breath catch. "You are my choice, Marlena. Every day you are my choice. You always will be." She pulled him down for a kiss, tasting promise and forever on his lips. They returned to the house as twilight painted the sky in shades of purple and gold. The children ran to greet them, Thomas shouting about a snake he had seen by the barn, and Sarah babbling excitedly about the cookies Mrs. Chen had let her help bake. Marlena scooped Sarah into her arms while Zachary swung Thomas onto his shoulders, and they went inside together, a family. That night, after the children were asleep and the house was quiet, Zachary and Marlena sat on their porch, watching the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. His arm was around her shoulders, her head resting against his chest, and Marlena thought about how far she had come from the frightened, scarred girl who had arrived in Veta believing herself unlovable. "What are you thinking?" Zachary asked, his voice rumbling beneath her ear. "That I am happy, that I never thought I could be this happy." "Good, that is all I have ever wanted for you." He pressed a kiss to her hair. "For us." 3 more years passed in contentment. The school grew, requiring an assistant teacher, and Marlena hired a young woman from town who had just finished normal school. Thomas started formal lessons, showing an aptitude for mathematics that delighted his mother. Sarah proved to be as stubborn as predicted. but also kind and gentle with animals, spending hours in the barn with the new foals each spring. Marlena was 31 and Zachary 34 when they celebrated their 8th anniversary with a party that filled the ranch house and spilled out into the yard. Friends and neighbors came from miles around, and the celebration lasted well into the night. Marlena cooked for days in preparation, and Mrs. Chen finally told her to sit down before she worked herself to exhaustion. "You have people who can help now," the older woman said firmly. "Let them." It was a lesson Marlena was slowly learning, to accept help, to trust others, to believe that her scars did not mean she had to prove her worth through constant work. That fall, Marlena discovered she was pregnant for the 3rd time, unexpected but welcome. She was older now, and the pregnancy was harder than the previous 2. But Zachary fussed over her with such devotion that Mrs. Chen threatened to throw him out of his own house if he did not stop hovering. Their 2nd son arrived in April, small but healthy, with a full head of dark hair and lungs that could wake the dead. They named him James, and he fit into the family as if he had always been meant to be there. Thomas took his role as oldest brother seriously, helping with the baby when Marlena needed a rest. Sarah was initially jealous of the attention James received but gradually warmed to him, especially when he began to smile and coo at her. The house rang with children's laughter and occasional tears, with the chaos of a growing family, and Marlena loved every messy, exhausting moment of it. Zachary proved to be an exceptional father, patient and playful, teaching the children about the ranch and the land while also encouraging their education. He built Thomas a small saddle and taught him to ride. He read to Sarah every night, even when he was bone-tired from a long day's work. He walked James when the baby had colic, pacing the floors at midnight so Marlena could sleep. "You are a good father," Marlena told him one evening as they watched the children play in the yard. "I had a good example," he said, "and I have a better partner. I could not do any of this without you, Marlena. We make a good team, the best team." When James was 2, Mrs. Chen announced she was retiring. Her daughter in San Francisco had been asking her to come stay, and she had finally decided to accept. The news saddened Marlena, who had come to rely on the older woman's steady presence, but she understood. "You have been good to me," Mrs. Chen said as she prepared to leave. "When I first met you, I saw a scared young woman who thought her scars made her worthless. I am glad you learned the truth." "You helped teach me," Marlena said, embracing her. "Thank you for everything." They hired a new housekeeper, a widow from town named Patricia who loved children and fit seamlessly into the household. Life continued its forward march, seasons turning, children growing, the ranch prospering. Marlena's teaching reputation spread beyond the immediate area, and she was invited to speak at a territorial education conference in Denver. Zachary insisted on going with her, and they made a trip of it, leaving the children with Patricia and taking the train to the city. Denver amazed Marlena with its size and noise, but she found she preferred the open spaces of home. Still, the conference was enlightening, and she returned with new ideas and teaching methods to implement in her school. "You are making a difference," Zachary told her on the train ride home. "Those children you teach, you are giving them opportunities they would never have otherwise. You should be proud." "I am," she said, and realized it was true. She was proud of what she had built, of the life she and Zachary had created together. The scars were still there, would always be there, but they had become simply a part of her rather than her defining feature. Thomas was 10, Sarah 8, and James 6 when Marlena discovered she was pregnant once more. She was 35 and the pregnancy came as a surprise to both her and Zachary. They had assumed their family was complete, but life apparently had other plans. "Are you happy?" she asked him when she told him the news. "Always," he said, pulling her close. "Every child is a blessing. Every day with you is a blessing." This pregnancy was the most difficult yet, and the midwife warned Marlena to rest as much as possible. The children tried to help, taking on more chores and being quieter around the house. Zachary barely left her side, managing the ranch from home as much as he could. Their second daughter arrived in February during a snowstorm, small but fierce, with Marlena's wheat-colored hair and Zachary's gray-green eyes. They named her Elizabeth, and she completed their family. Recovery took longer this time, and Marlena had to accept that she was not as young as she once was. But surrounded by her husband and children, supported by Patricia and the ranch hands who had become like family, she healed. "4 children," Zachary said one night as they lay in bed, Elizabeth sleeping in her cradle nearby. "We have 4 beautiful, healthy children and each other. I could not ask for more." "Neither could I," Marlena whispered. "You gave me a life I never dreamed possible. You loved me when I could not love myself. You taught me that I was worthy of happiness. You were always worthy. I just helped you see it." He kissed her softly. "I love you, Marlena. My perfect, scarred, stubborn, incredible wife. I will love you until my last breath and beyond. And I love you, always." The years continued to pass, each one adding new layers to their story. Thomas grew into a capable young man who worked the ranch alongside his father, already showing leadership skills that would serve him well when he eventually inherited. Sarah discovered a passion for teaching and began helping Marlena at the school, showing patience and creativity with the younger children. James proved to be a natural with horses, training them with gentle skill. Elizabeth grew into a spirited little girl who charmed everyone she met. Marlena's brother Thomas visited regularly now, bringing his wife and eventually his own children to meet their cousins. The ranch became a gathering place for family and friends, a place of laughter and love and belonging. On a warm summer evening when Marlena was 42 and Zachary was 45, they sat together on the porch as they had done countless times before. The children were scattered around the yard, the older ones supervising the younger ones, their voices rising in play. The sun was setting behind the Spanish peaks, painting the sky in glorious colors. "You remember the first time you saw me?" Marlena asked, her hand in Zachary's. "In the general store. You were reaching for baking powder, and when you turned, I thought you were the most interesting woman I had ever seen. You saw my scars. I saw you, strong and wounded and brave. I saw a woman I wanted to know." He squeezed her hand. "Best decision I ever made helping you that day. It led to this, to everything. I thought I was unlovable," she said softly. "I thought the fire had taken everything from me, including any chance at happiness. And now I know that scars are just stories written on our skin. Mine tell the story of survival, of strength, of learning to love and be loved. They are part of me, but they are not all of me." "They never were," Zachary said. "You were always perfect to me, Marlena. Every scar, every imperfection, every stubborn, beautiful part of you." She turned to him, this man who had changed her life, who had loved her when she could not love herself, who had given her a family and a home and a future she never thought possible. "Thank you," she whispered, "for seeing me, for choosing me, for loving me." "Thank you for letting me," he replied, "for taking a chance on us, for building this life with me." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun sank lower and the stars began to emerge. Thomas called that supper was ready, his voice carrying across the yard, and the family began to gather. Marlena stood, Zachary rising with her, their hands still clasped. As they walked toward the house together, surrounded by the children they had raised and the life they had built, Marlena felt a profound sense of gratitude and peace. She had traveled so far from that frightened girl on the westbound stage, that woman who had believed her scars made her ugly and unworthy of love. Zachary had taught her the truth, had shown her through patient devotion and unwavering love that she was perfect exactly as she was. And in teaching her to love herself, he had given her the greatest gift of all. That night, after the children were in bed and the house was quiet, Zachary traced her scars one more time, his touch as reverent as it had been on their wedding night years ago. "Perfect," he murmured against her skin. "You will always be perfect to me." And in his arms, in the life they had created together, Marlena finally, fully believed him. The scars would always be there, a permanent reminder of childhood tragedy, but they no longer defined her. She was Marlena Grayson, wife and mother and teacher, beloved and cherished, whole and happy. She was home. The seasons turned, bringing the cycle of ranch life with them. Spring calving, summer branding, fall roundups, and winter's quiet reflection. The children continued to grow, each finding their own paths while remaining connected to the land and family that had nurtured them. Thomas took over more of the daily ranch operations, his decisions sound and his leadership respected by the hands. Sarah opened her own small school in town, her methods innovative and her dedication inspiring. James began breeding horses, his stock sought after throughout the territory. Elizabeth, still young, showed promise in everything she attempted, curious and bright and full of life. Marlena continued teaching, though she handed more responsibility to younger teachers as the years passed. She found joy in mentoring new educators, in sharing the knowledge she had accumulated over decades of teaching children from all backgrounds. Her school had grown from a handful of ranch children to a proper institution with multiple teachers, and a curriculum that prepared students for college or skilled trades. The scars that had once dominated her thoughts became simply a feature of her face, no more or less important than the laugh lines around her eyes or the silver threading through her hair. Younger teachers who came to work with her never mentioned them, and children who learned in her classroom saw only a kind woman who made learning exciting. On their 25th anniversary, Zachary surprised Marlena with a trip back to Missouri. She had not returned since leaving all those years ago, and part of her was reluctant to revisit old sorrows. But Zachary was insistent, and she trusted him completely by now. They traveled by train, the journey far more comfortable than the westbound stage had been decades earlier. When they arrived at her childhood home, she was surprised to find it rebuilt, no longer the burned ruin she remembered. A young family lived there now, and they graciously allowed Marlena and Zachary to walk the property. "This is where it happened," Marlena said quietly, standing where the old farmhouse had been. "Where the fire started in the kitchen and spread so quickly. I was upstairs, and by the time I smelled smoke, the staircase was burning. My father came through the flames to get me. He saved my life, but I was burned in the process." "He must have loved you very much," Zachary said, his arm around her shoulders. "He did. They both did." Marlena looked around the property, at the fields she had played in as a child, at the creek where she had caught frogs with her brother. "I spent so many years hating this place, hating what happened here. But standing here now, I remember the good things too. The love, the laughter, the family we were before the fire. Those memories are part of you too," Zachary said. "The fire was not the only thing that shaped you, Marlena. You were loved before you were scarred, and you were strong before you were tested." They visited her parents' graves, Marlena placing wildflowers on the simple headstones and introducing Zachary to the people who had given her life. "I hope they would be proud of the woman I became," she said softly. "They would be," Zachary assured her. How could they not be? The trip gave Marlena a sense of closure she had not realized she needed. She returned to Colorado with a lighter heart, the past finally integrated into her present rather than haunting it. Years continued to accumulate, each one adding richness to the life they had built. Zachary's hair went completely silver, though he remained strong and active well into his 60s. Marlena moved more slowly than she once had, but her mind stayed sharp and her heart remained open. They became grandparents when Thomas married a neighboring rancher's daughter and had children of his own, followed eventually by grandchildren from their other children. The ranch house rang with multiple generations now. Sunday dinners becoming loud, chaotic affairs with children running underfoot and adults laughing around a table that Zachary had built longer to accommodate everyone. Marlena cooked less these days, handing over the kitchen to daughters-in-law and grown daughters, but she always made the pies, her hand still steady with a rolling pin. "We built something lasting," Zachary said one evening as they watched their grandchildren play in the yard where their own children had played decades before. They were in their 70s now, both moving slower but still together, still in love. "We built everything," Marlena agreed. "A family, a home, a legacy. You gave me all of this, Zachary. You gave me a life worth living." "We gave it to each other," he corrected gently. "I was lonely before you came, Marlena. Successful, yes, but lonely. You filled my house with love and laughter. You made it a home." They sat together as the sun set behind the mountains they had watched for more than 4 decades. Marlena's scars had faded with age, though they would always be visible, but they had long since ceased to matter. She had lived a full, rich life, had loved and been loved, had raised children who were raising children of their own. "I need you to know something," Zachary said, his voice serious. "If I had my life to live over, I would not change a single moment. Every decision led me to you, and you were worth everything. Even when I was difficult, when I did not believe I deserved love, especially then, you taught me patience. You taught me that love is not just feeling, it is action. It is choosing someone every day, especially when they cannot choose themselves." "You chose me every day," Marlena said, her voice thick with emotion. "Even when I gave you reasons not to, even when easier options presented themselves. You chose me. I will always choose you. In this life and whatever comes after." They stayed on the porch until the stars emerged, the same stars they had watched together for more than 40 years. Eventually, the grandchildren were called inside, and the house gradually quieted as the younger families departed for their own homes. Thomas and his wife lived in a house on the property now, running the ranch with Zachary's guidance, and they bid goodnight before heading to their own door. Marlena and Zachary prepared for bed in comfortable synchronicity, their movements coordinated through decades of sharing space. He helped her with the buttons she could no longer reach easily, and she folded his clothes while he washed. They climbed into bed together, his arm automatically coming around her, her head finding its familiar place on his shoulder. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too. Always have, always will." The years that followed were gentle ones. They slowed further but remained active in ranch life, Zachary advising Thomas on business decisions and Marlena still occasionally teaching at the school that now bore her name. The Marlena Grayson School for Children had become an institution in the region, its reputation for excellence drawing students from surrounding towns. They celebrated their 50th anniversary surrounded by 4 children, 12 grandchildren, and 3 great-grandchildren. The party lasted an entire weekend, with people coming from across Colorado and even from California, where Marlena's brother still lived. There were speeches and toasts, laughter and tears, and through it all, Marlena and Zachary sat together, holding hands as they had done for 5 decades. 50 years, Marlena said in wonder when they finally had a moment alone. We have been married 50 years, Zachary. Best 50 years of my life, he said, kissing her softly. Here is to 50 more. They both knew that was unlikely. They were in their 80s now, their bodies showing the wear of long, productive lives. But they treasured each day they had, finding joy in simple moments. Morning coffee together, watching the sunrise, reading aloud in the evenings, visits from children and grandchildren. When Zachary fell ill in the winter of their 52nd year, Marlena nursed him with the same dedication he had shown her throughout their marriage. The doctor said it was his heart, worn out from a lifetime of hard work, and there was little to be done. Zachary faced his mortality with characteristic courage, using his remaining strength to ensure the ranch was in order and his family provided for. I am not afraid, he told Marlena one evening as she sat beside his bed. I have lived a full life. I have loved and been loved. I have no regrets. I am afraid, she admitted, tears streaming down her scarred cheeks. I am afraid of being without you. You have been my strength, my anchor, my heart. I do not know how to exist without you. You are stronger than you think. You always have been. His hand, thin now but still warm, squeezed hers. I need you to promise me something. Anything. Do not hide after I am gone. Do not let grief make you retreat into yourself the way fear once made you hide your face. Keep living, Marlena. Keep teaching, keep loving, keep being the incredible woman I married. Promise me. I promise, she whispered, though she could not imagine how she would keep that promise. And know this, loving you was the greatest privilege of my life. You were perfect to me from the moment I met you, and you will be perfect in my memory forever. Your scars never made you ugly, Marlena. They made you who you are, and who you are is magnificent. He died 3 days later, peacefully in his sleep, with Marlena holding his hand and their children surrounding his bed. The grief was immense, a physical weight on Marlena's chest that made breathing difficult. But she kept her promise. She did not hide. The funeral brought the entire community together. Zachary Grayson had been respected and admired. His fairness as an employer and his integrity as a businessman earning him widespread regard. But it was the love story people talked about, the rancher who had seen beauty where others saw only scars, who had loved his wife with unwavering devotion for more than 50 years. He changed my life, Marlena said in her eulogy, her voice steady despite her tears. He taught me that I was worthy of love. He showed me that scars are not flaws but stories, not shame but survival. He loved me perfectly, and in doing so, he helped me love myself. I will miss him every day for the rest of my life, but I will honor him by living the way he taught me to live. With courage, with love, with openness to all the beauty this world contains. The weeks and months after Zachary's death were the hardest of Marlena's life. The grief came in waves, sometimes manageable and sometimes overwhelming, but she kept her promise. She continued teaching a few days a week. She spent time with her children and grandchildren. She tended the flower garden Zachary had planted for her years ago, talking to him as she worked. I miss you, she told him on what would have been their 53rd anniversary, standing at his grave with fresh flowers. Every moment of every day I miss you. But I am still here, still living because you taught me how. Thank you, my love, for everything. She lived 3 more years, long enough to see 2 more great-grandchildren born, long enough to watch Thomas's oldest son take over more of the ranch operations, representing the 4th generation of Graysons on this land. She remained sharp and engaged until the end, passing peacefully in her sleep on a warm spring morning with windows open and wildflowers on her nightstand. They buried her beside Zachary, and the entire community attended her funeral just as they had attended his. The school closed for the day in her honor, and her former students, now adults with children of their own, spoke of the teacher who had changed their lives. "She taught us that beauty comes in many forms," one woman said. "That scars tell stories worth hearing. That kindness matters more than appearance. She lived what she taught, and she made us all better for knowing her." Thomas, now in his 60s and with grandchildren of his own, delivered the final words. "My mother believed she was broken when she came to Colorado. She believed her scars made her unworthy of love. But my father saw the truth. He saw her strength, her kindness, her capacity for love, and in loving her, he helped her see herself clearly. They built this ranch together, raised us together, created a legacy that extends far beyond cattle and land. They showed us what true love looks like, what commitment looks like, what forever looks like, and though they are both gone now, that legacy lives on in all of us." The stone they placed on her grave was simple, bearing her name, her dates, and a single line that Zachary had written in his will years before. "Perfect in every way. Beloved wife, mother, teacher, friend." The ranch continued under Thomas's capable leadership, and the school bearing Marlena's name thrived, expanding to include higher grades and more sophisticated curriculum. The love story of Marlena and Zachary became legend in Veta, told and retold to new generations as an example of how love can heal, how it can transform, how it can endure. And on quiet evenings when the sun sets behind the Spanish peaks and the wind whispers through the grass, people say you can still feel them there. The scarred woman who learned she was beautiful and the rancher who taught her to see it. Together forever, their love written into the very soil of the land they cherished, their story a testimony to the power of choosing love over fear, acceptance over judgment, and hope over despair. In the end, that was their true legacy. Not the ranch or the school or even the children and grandchildren who carried their names forward. Their legacy was the simple, profound truth that they had shown by example. That love sees beyond scars. That true beauty lies in courage and kindness. That we are all perfect in our imperfections, all worthy of being loved exactly as we are. And that sometimes, in the wild territories of both land and heart, the bravest thing we can do is let ourselves be seen, scars and all, and trust that we will be loved not despite them, but because of everything they represent. Survival, strength, the story of a life fully lived.